Hello and welcome to the second episode of my Guilty Gear Strive character guides. I'm making these videos to help out newer players just getting into the Guilty Gear series, as well as those who might be interested in learning specific characters but have no clue where to start. Today we cover Axel Lowe, a dangerous zoner with surprisingly potent tools both up close and far away. First, let's go over the format of this series. We will start with an overview where I will provide a brief explanation on what kind of character it is we are talking about, as well as said character's strengths and weaknesses. Next, we discuss their game plan, how to play, and how to beat. After, we will go over each tool in the character's toolkit, quickly discussing each tool's specific implications in their kit. After that, there will be a brief combo and setup section that should be a good starting point for most anyone learning the character. Finally, we'll recap on the most important parts, go over some notable resources, and finally, notable people who play the character. Also, I'm going to be talking rather quickly in this video to help condense it down to a digestible size, but if need be, don't feel bad about slowing down the video in order to fully digest all the information. Now, without further ado, let's get into the video. Axel Lowe is one of the most changed characters from his previous iterations, changing from a dominant mid-range pressure character to a full-on zoner with tons of tools to keep the opponent away. Axel is unique in his zoning in that he actually gains more options the farther away the opponent is, due to his specials having minimum ranges, so Axel is actually able to apply his scariest offensive pressure at full screen. He has incredible tools for controlling space, as well as lots of technical depth thanks to techniques such as the bomber loop and his instant overhead. Axel's main strength is his incredible ranged options. He has moves that travel half screen in 10 frames, a full screen command grab that is faster the farther away you are, and Rekka-like pressure that can leave him plus on block even. Axel has the strongest air coverage in the game, sporting easily the best lineup of anti-airs in the entire cast. Axel can actually oppress the opponent at close range when he has the corner thanks to his instant overhead mix-ups and high corner damage due to his Axel bomber loops. He has reliable and strong frame traps you can use to run some offense on an overly antsy player. Has safe Oki and burst safe setups right out his ass. When Axel gets a hit, it's likely he's going to capitalize on it. Axel has the lowest damage output in the game, and fairly limited combo routes with and without meter outside of bomb loops. Axel's close to mid-range defense is abysmal, thanks to his previously mentioned minimum range attacks, lack of a reversal, and bad movement options. Axel's chains can be hit by smart opponents, so he can't necessarily throw out chains willy-nilly. Not exactly a crippling weakness, but certainly something you have to be aware of at all times. Axel has some dangerous dead zones in his long-range normals that can be capitalized on to great effect. As Axel, you mostly want to keep the opponent as far away as possible. To do this, you need to be able to read your opponent in an instant and craft a perfect blend of aggressive and reactionary zoning. If Axel zones too aggressively, an opponent can easily run in on him if he guesses wrong about where they're going next. If he zones too reactionary, a careful opponent can simply approach safely and slowly gain distance on him little by little, walking him to the corner. Make sure to force the opponent to respect your full screen presence with Rensen, JS, 6K, and 2S, but don't get too carried away throwing these out. As like I previously mentioned, an opponent can gain huge distance on you just from guessing right against some attempted offense, or counter hit you by poking at your chains. After you make yourself a threat, you can chill out a bit and play more reactionary, stuffing an opponent's approach who is hoping you whiff a normal or two. Defending as Axel is kind of like a balancing act. You can't let the opponent get too comfortable by approaching relatively unchecked, but you also can't let the opponent run wild with punishing your long-distance checks. You need to always stay in the middle, being threatening to sit still against and threatening to approach against. If you score a hard knockdown, Axel can apply pretty decent Okizeme thanks to his strong pushback, and if he has meter, he can use a 50-50 with his JH to apply some truly threatening offense. On defense, YRC is your best friend. If an opponent gets on you and you're getting close to the corner, spend everything you have getting away from that corner, because if the opponent knows what they're doing, you pretty much lose once you get trapped in the corner with no meter. Axel can also use his meter to cancel a whiffed normal, letting him apply his long-range pressure relatively safely. To summarize, in order to play Axel, you need to keep the opponent where you want them, both physically and mentally. Your main goal as Axel is to keep a balance between pressure and reactionary play. Your main goal against Axel is to tilt this balance. Against a pressuring Axel, use your 6P to check normals like 5P and JS. Against a reactionary Axel, approach carefully and pay close attention to Axel's dead zones, and try to stay in them whenever possible. Make sure you're paying attention to him, and if he whiffs a move or tries something risky, get the absolute most you can out of it. Make absolute certain you utilize FD breaking in this matchup, it's 100% necessary to get in on him. Just Block is also very good against Axel, but this requires a bit more matchup knowledge thanks to his frame trap options. Once you get in on Axel, focus every single inch of your attention to making sure he does not ever get away. Remember to be super careful with your reversal options, as they can easily be avoided thanks to Axel's slew of reversal save routes. Make sure you don't get too frustrated by his zoning, as in order to beat him, you need to be focused on fighting him, and not hating him. One of Axel's long-range buttons, and an integral part of his kit. Very quick and useful for safely poking at a faraway opponent. Watch out, as most characters can run under it since it hits high. This can also be used to check an IAD. Axel's 6p is great simply because of its context in his toolkit. Most of his anti-airs have somewhat long startup to compensate for their high damage, but if the enemy is right in your face, a 6p is just what you need to push them back to zoning range. Axel's fastest normal at 5 frames. It's his best Abare option, but not a great one. Most useful for its jump cancel, allowing him to start a bomber loop. Generally speaking, it's a pretty average 5k. One of Axel's greatest anti-airs, covers an opponent trying to horizontally jump in at Axel at pretty much any range they'd be jumping from. This move also has a surprisingly generous grounded horizontal hitbox, so it can be used as a safe up-close button if you don't know if the enemy will jump or not. Axel's main close-range combo and pressure starter. Jump cancelable for bomber loops and instant overheads, also a pretty good anti-air, but using it would be like being offered a 5-star meal and grabbing fast food instead. A phenomenal mid-range poke to prove that Axel can play footsies same as everyone else. Covers a dead zone that his other normals can't cover as quickly. Mostly Gatling fodder if anything, you'll probably never be using this in neutral for anything other than canceling from slash. A pretty okay overhead with great range that doubles as an instant air dash denial, so it can be used as a 2-in-1 option to both mix a blocking opponent and stuff an approaching opponent, but using it is a big risk because it puts Axel up close and minus, his 2 least favorite things. He can time this on wake up to hit meaty for a hit confirm combo or leave him plus, but this is situational at best. A standard 5D. You won't be using it all too much since Axel doesn't want to be in 5D range, but if he does land it, it's one of his highest damage meterless combo options. The low counterpart to 5P. This hits low as well, meaning it's great at poking ground approaches quickly, and is a button you'll be using quite a lot of. A strong 2k thanks to the fact that it low profiles projectiles, meaning Axel can slip under stun edges and leave Kai players completely lost as to what they should do about it. If the enemy is too close or too high for Axel to 6k, good thing he has 2s to cover that range too. A phenomenal anti-air for vertical jump-ins. Axel's longest range poking normal, like a higher 2p in both startup, recovery, range, reward, and risk. Hits low, making it phenomenal at stopping a grounded opponent from doing whatever it is they're trying to do. Another normal you'll be seeing quite a lot of from Axel. A good 2D, but not an especially unique one. Useful in the same way any other 2D is, for comboing into a hard knockdown, more distance, and whiff punching. A jumping version of 5p. The best air-to-air you could ever ask for. A pretty good close-range air option for pushing an opponent stuck to you away when you're airborne. JP may be the best air-to-air you could ever ask for, but JS is the best air-to-ground you could ever ask for. An overhead attack that easily reaches over half screen, has a great hitbox for catching jumps, and is active for long enough that it will sometimes catch opponents running under it, its primary counterplay. This is the normal you will be seeing the most from Axel, as it could single-handedly define his neutral, provided he didn't have a whole list of other great ranged buttons, of course. A jump-in button with amazing vertical distance, making it great for those situations where you end up scrambling in the air with the opponent waiting to catch you as you fall. Don't worry, it happens to everyone sometimes. Can be used right after a jump for an instant overhead, but be aware that this is punishable on hit if you don't Roman cancel it right after. Even still, having a permanent 50-50 baked into his moveset is pretty strong for Axel. It's an up-close button, but compared to everything else Axel has, it doesn't have that great a use. It can be used to jump up and catch air dashes, but you could also use J5P, 5P, 6K, 2S, 6P, J5K, Snail, JS, well, you get the point. It's a throw, that's for sure. Axel doesn't really have any noteworthy tools to set up for a throw, but having strike through a mix-up is simply a fundamental necessity. Another option for catching an air approach you didn't with long-range buttons. Useful for specific punish scenarios. First off, you might wonder, why did I type Rensen when in-game it's called Sickle Flash? Well, that's because that's the Japanese name, and the one the community uses. Let's face it, Sickle Flash sounds dumb. A strong full-screen pressure tool that the opponents must respect thanks to its follow-up sporting massive coverage. That being said, don't use it willy-nilly as it has long startup and can easily be dashed in on. Rensen's follow-ups are useful in a situation referred to as Rensen Rock Paper Scissors. To break it down quick and simple, you can use Soaring Chain Strike, Winter Cherry, and Spinning Chain Strike. Soaring Chain Strike beats Jump and loses to Run Forward. Winter Cherry beats Stand Still and loses to Jump, and Spinning Chain Strike beats Run and loses to Jump. Commonly referred to as Rensen 8, this move sweeps the air in an arc in front of Axel to catch an opponent trying to dash over Rensen. But beware, this move has a huge dead range in the middle of it that can be used to avoid it. On block and hit, it yoinks the opponent directly at Axel, but this isn't as bad as it may seem since you can push them away with an OTG close slash on hit, and on block, you usually end up in advantage. Notice that I didn't say plus, because it technically leaves you minus 11, but when it hits in the air, it leaves Axel plus. To summarize this move in one word, I'd choose unreliable. However, it still exists, and you should force your opponent to respect it. Just don't use it too often. Commonly referred to as Rensen 2, Axel spins his chain in a vacuum that sucks the opponent into his range. Useful for catching opponents trying to approach on the ground against Axel, hoping to end up in Rensen 8's dead zone, or to snag an opponent trying to press after blocking Rensen. Hits low, so block low. This can be held for an extremely long time, so it can sometimes hit an opponent standing up in the middle of the move. Doesn't have a hitbox above it despite what the animation may suggest, so you beat this by jumping at it or blocking it all the way through, as Axel is minus after it. A super strong Rensen follow-up that can be delayed to explode the sickle at any point during Rensen's recovery. It is a mix-up in and of itself, since the non-delayed version is fast, but the delayed version is plus, letting Axel do another Rensen. Because of this, it's not uncommon to trap the opponent with Rensens over and over again. But like I said, don't rely on this to work since they can easily jump it. The delay Winter Cherry hits super meaty, to the point where I feel like the explosion has like 5,000 active frames. The delay can also be used to catch a neutral jumping opponent, and you can detonate the sickle to hit even if the opponent jumped the initial hit of Rensen. Remember that Winter Cherry only hits at around full screen, so try to use it anywhere else and you will get punished. A full screen command grab that is faster the farther away the opponent is. Good for catching an opponent who is scared into blocking Rensen or any of Axel's long-range tools. However, if the enemy reacts and jumps it, which is possible even at full screen, they can punish Axel from almost anywhere on the screen due to its insanely long recovery time. Meaning, this move can be useful for opening opponents up, but it comes with a huge risk, so use it at your own discretion. Has a different animation and can be comboed off of if it hits close, but if you're hitting it up close, there are bigger things to discuss. A fundamental part of Axel's toolkit. Creates space and ends block strings with Axel Plus and at its desired range. Shockingly doesn't have that big of a hurt box on the chain. Xrd Axel could never. So this can be used to safely apply Okizeme against DP heavy opponents. Note that it will whiff if the opponent FDs during your block strings, which can lead to them getting an approach if they're on top of their game. Please stop using this at round start, there is actually no reason to do that over jump back JS. Has a dead zone up close. Axel's new combo ender, swings in an upward arc all around Axel, and has a dead zone up close as well. Punishable on block, so not that useful in neutral, but it can be used to cover extremely niche scenarios since it multi-hits. An air version of Snail that extends farther than the grounded one. This also means the dead zone is bigger, so be careful. More useful in neutral thanks to its unique coverage, but its best use is after a JS, as it frame traps an opponent who may be anxious to approach after blocking JS. An air DP that pretty much only exists as a combo tool. Axel can perform what is called a Tiger Knee Bomber, TK Bomber for short, by using a jump cancelable normal and inputting the special and a jump all in one swift motion. There are tons of ways to do this, so ask your favorite Axel player their technique, and try out different ways to pull it off. By doing this frame perfectly, then catching the opponent as they fall again, you can loop Axel Bombers in the corner. It's tricky, so don't feel bad if you can't land it very often. I've mained Axel in Xrd for a very long time, and still struggle to get 3 bomber loops occasionally. That being said, it's Axel's only reliable source of high damage, so it's important to at least be able to kind of do. Axel's only reversal. A bad one, but he'll take what he can get. Does bad damage and can be punished on block by jumping the second hit where he strikes the chains forward. The coolest super in the game, and as of the release build, sadly maybe the worst one. Expires way too fast, doesn't net you that much damage if it works, and Axel has much better meter uses. Only really useful in those low health situations where you desperately need to snag the opponent approaching, but even then, a good opponent will be aware of it and never dash when you have the charge. Axel is an oppressive zoning character with tons of options at long range, and surprisingly potent frame traps and mix-ups at close range too. Remember to balance out pressuring with his long-range normals and reacting to enemy approaches. Spend meter on Roman Cancel whenever the opponent threatens an approach or corner pressure, and don't rely on Rensen or its follow-ups as it can easily get you punished or approached on. Put a satisfying amount of effort into exploring Axel's rich setups, frame traps, and advanced combo routes. But most important of all, stop round starting with Rainwater, it's really easy to counter!